today, I'll just give you a little bit of background in terms of what we mentioned to Sam and to Manish before is that we developed a program tailored basically kind of for purely for startups. So it seemed a natural kind of space to go to say, hey, do you fancy kind of getting involved and seeing this and seeing how we can kind of support the Leicester startup community. So we're a Leicester-based business. Solver Studio, we've been going for a couple of years now. But we just kind of, I suppose, as we constantly do, especially kind of in a post-COVID world, keep kind of reevaluating what we're doing and where we can create some real impact. Can everybody see the screen? I suppose that's the first and foremost. Make sure that you can.
Yeah.
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 Fantastic. I will keep trying to keep an eye on the chat as well and make sure that I'm picking up any questions. But with any luck, we won't have too many problems. So, startup sprints. I'm going to assume that some of you may have heard of a sprint before, but for many of you, it would be kind of the first time you may have really kind of dive into a sprint format. So I will kind of cover a little bit about what a sprint is, etc., and how we've adapted it purely for startups. I'll also give you a little bit of background into why we're doing this and how we kind of hopefully going to be playing a bit of a role in developing startups, not just in Leicester, but across the UK, and becoming more sustainable as a business, moving them towards their minimum value services and products to kind of help them to test and to build things. But I've just got a little bit of an image there, which is kind of how sprints kind of came about, really. So design sprints were kind of created, I suppose, or certainly kind of initially conceptualized by Google Ventures through a gentleman called Jake Knapp. And he's partnered with people kind of from everywhere, from every kind of sector, and in pretty much every continent as well. He literally wrote the book on design sprints. And he has kind of evolved the process, but primarily it's a case of how to rapidly produce ideas and quickly learn from them so that you don't go through an expensive process of reiterating through launching things, then learning from it, and then coming back into how might we produce new ideas on the back of that learning, etc. Typically, that building and launching phase are quite expensive things to do, and especially from a startup perspective, are very kind of costly in time as well as finance. So sprints kind of don't get you to build something and then launch it and then try to learn from that. It rapidly goes from produce some ideas, quickly learn from them. So you kind of go through this little kind of rapid iteration, which will hopefully get you into a build and a launch phase in a far more meaningful way and a far more sustainable way as well. So I just wanted to kind of start off with that image, really. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in terms of how we do that from a startup perspective. Solver Studio is a collective, basically, of different designers and innovators. Like I said, we have an office based in Leicester, but we have, as part of the collective, designers based in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, in London, in Bath, and in Bristol. We're kind of dotted all around the place, and we work collectively within our kind of community to really kind of go out there and try and support corporations and small businesses, startups in this case, but also public sector organisations, community businesses, charities, etc. We're fairly kind of sector agnostic, but our kind of driver is to kind of help businesses and help organisations to innovate, to do things better, to do them more quickly and create more impact. And we can do that through things like sprints. We can offer full service design methods and applications. We can do some deep dive around different research of customer and user experiences. Or we can kind of really think about from a business innovation point of view. Francine's on the call today, and she's a great business designer and is able to kind of really understand what the opportunities are, kind of go through that SWOT analysis kind of process with people, and really kind of identify those opportunities and help people to innovate. So we've got quite a mixture of collective expertise at our disposal. But we found ourselves doing was working more and more with startups. And I don't know whether that's just kind of through our collective experience as to whether we've already got those connections with startups, whether there just generally is a rise of startup culture. And I think that most definitely during the recent pandemic is that we have seen more and more startups, more and more people registered as self-employed. And we want to try and help those people and those companies to succeed. But in order for us to help them to succeed, we were trying to understand, well, fundamentally, why do startups fail? And I put fail in inverted commas because I know that's a bit of a loaded term for a lot of people. But there is, kind of a lot of evidence and a lot of reports out there from decades old as to fundamentally the high failure rate of startups. I think generally the common statistic is around 80% of startups don't see their third birthday. So that's 4 out of 5 people or co-founders that have started an enterprise that don't see it through to their third birthday. Most of those will fall out between that 12 and 18 month period. So just as a quick kind of question to you guys, really, and you could type in the chat, is from your experience or maybe just kind of some guesswork, why do you guys think that startups fail or don't see it past their second and third birthdays? You can just type in the chat and I'll pick it up from there. Failure to secure funding. Someone's going to mention money, most definitely. Anybody else? Yeah, revenue. Why do startups fail? I'm going to show you a list of about 20 in a second. So let's see if you guys can tick some of those off. Risk, business awareness, yeah. Poor customer development. Lack of enthusiasm, awesome, yeah. Failure to delegate tasks. Yeah, I think everybody's kind of definitely on the right lines with this. There'll be no surprise that most of those are referred to in some way. And it's initially, the top one there, this is from CB Insights, which is a kind of a business insight company based in New York. And they do, this is their bread and butter, is analyzing kind of sectors and businesses and understanding, where they're at. And they did a piece of work purely around startups and failure rates. And top one there was about no market need, was basically the idea just fundamentally doesn't have a market or has too small a market, just not something which is viable and sustainable. The second one there says run out of cash. Obviously, you guys kind of picked up on money and lack of revenue or lack of funding. There was another report that I saw that was quite interesting. That startups that had actually received funding through grants or through investment, they basically had that as their number one kind of reason for failure was lack of money, even though they'd accessed some funding. those that hadn't accessed funding actually had it as their, I think it was their third, maybe, or maybe their second reason for failure. So quite interesting to see that those that had actually accessed some money, they were the ones saying that they were failing because they run out of money or didn't have the cash. Whereas those that hadn't received that funding, there were other reasons as to why that they'd failed. Even though this is written as a list, is that I think it's fair to say that there's never ever one single reason why businesses fail. They're usually myriad, and usually they're quite intrinsically linked. So I think that I know Sam mentioned about revenue. Obviously that's just can also be tied into running out of money. If fundamentally we're not able to kind of generate that revenue and those margins, then ultimately we're not going to be able to produce a sound financial model. So there's lots of different reasons. I think there's a human element to this. Quite often, and I think that this list kind of demonstrates it quite well, is that when entrepreneurs are asked why they failed, is that they talk about external reasons. It is quite often what they need to really think about is themselves and their role and what they can do and what they can do differently next time, I suppose. Everybody's on a journey. So this kind of I suppose this diagram kind of is through a company called Fractal. So they did something similar. They produced a web, I suppose, of these different reasons why businesses fail or startups fail, but kind of linked them together. So they asked these different businesses to say what were the top 3 reasons, and then kind of linked them together to just demonstrate that nothing is in a silo. So there's things around here around lack of focus. I think you guys already mentioned customer development issues, which I think Sam mentioned, technical product issues, disharmony in the team, no market need. So there are all these kind of reasons for startup failure, but they are intrinsically linked. There's never, typically there's not one thing that kind of is the main cause. So when we were trying to think of, how do we help businesses to not fail? Obviously, we needed to understand why they did fail. We were unable to kind of go and raise a load of cash and then just throw money at the problem. We can't kind of fund startups. That's not something we can do. And when we're looking at this web and looking at this map, things like lack of focus, disharmony in teams, understanding market needs, customer development, and just understanding kind of where all these different things and this business model not viable over on the left-hand side there. We were looking at these things going, well, through our sprint program, we know that a lot of these things get tackled through design sprints. That's what they're fundamentally there for, is to develop things at pace, to test things quickly with customers in mind, to involve those customers in the process of creating that product or service. So you're getting that immediate feedback, you're getting that test from the market. So it's all part of that process. So okay, sprints could be a response in terms of helping startups to kind of hopefully to not fail or to have a greater chance of success. Maybe that's the better one. So we're kind of looking at these the sprint and kind of recapping on what it is that it's there to do, and also then what does it mean in a startup context? Because typically what we do find with a standard sprint, whether it's over 4 or 5 days, maybe this is the first time that you guys have seen this, but typically a sprint is a process that goes from basically exploring and understanding the problem and mapping it out, and then right through into towards the end of day 5 of actually testing an idea with your marketplace, with real life customers, and learning from it. So it's a real rapid process that is done within 4 or 5 days. But we also know that this is an expensive process. And quite often startups simply won't have either the time, the money, or even the team to be able to actually do a meaningful sprint over 4 or 5 days to dedicate to a particular problem. So we had issues, obviously, of trying to make sure that it was applicable and relevant to startups, but also not too pricey or too arduous. We needed to make it accessible. So we went back to this and we were kind of right. So which things can we tick off? We need to go back to thinking very clearly about making it accessible. So rather than 5 days or 5 quite in-depth sessions, which is quite intense, we thought, how can we strip it back to its bare bones but still be meaningful? So we came up with 3 different sessions. Session 1, which we've termed as exploring. So it's a 3-hour session, which very much kind of looks at what problems it is that the startup currently has or has on the horizon, and already kind of identifying and trying to get ahead of the game, as it were. So we do a rapid process of understanding what the problem is, really focused on the business itself and on the founders and co-founders and whatever team around them, is to really kind of zone in on what are the key issues. We map it out in terms of, from a customer point of view, how does that problem affect them? So we really kind of root it in your users, in your clients or customers. And then we start doing some sketching. We start to kind of produce some ideas very, very quickly, and some quick concepts of what we might do to kind of respond to that. And there's an exercise called How Might We, which maybe you guys are very familiar with, but it's just about reframing that problem and saying, right, how might we address this? And then coming up with some rapid ideas. And we help you through that process. We facilitate that in a hopefully in a meaningful way. So that's only 3 hours. And then the second session, again, is only 3 hours. So we look at those concepts. We kind of then start to go through a little bit of a convergent process of critiquing them and deciding fundamentally what is practical, what is doable, what is viable and feasible for you as a business, and also as a result of doing this sprint. And then we start focusing on how we're going to prototype this idea. So the whole purpose of this is to make it incredibly practical, incredibly focused, but to give you guys the tools and the knowledge and know-how that you can replicate once this initial sprint has been done. You can then go and apply it again afterwards. So it's all practical. It's very much focused on you as a business, as a business owner or self-employed. Is really kind of zoning in on the practical things, and let's do something about it. So I'll show you a short clip from somebody from our pilot a little bit later on, who talks about this. I can't remember how she phrased it, but it was about this paralysis, this decision-making paralysis of sometimes when you're having this internal monologue and trying to decide what to do next, is that you become paralyzed by it. So you try and give it a few days to kind of come back to. But actually, this is kind of stripping that back and saying, no, we're going to make a choice. Let's be proactive. Let's do something. And that's the whole beauty of a sprint, is that it stops that paralysis and gets you from A to B to C much quicker. So those are 2 3-hour sessions, session 1, session 2. And then we have a third optional session, which is about checking that prototype and testing it with real customers. What we can do as a collective and as an organization is we can do that test on your behalf. We're happy to build that lo-fi prototype, go out there and get that research done and test that idea with real people, and then give you that feedback. Alternatively, is that we can talk to you about how to build that prototype and how to do it, and then you do it independently, and then we can have kind of a bit of a touch base exercise of just seeing what the outcome of it was. So session 3 is optional as part of the sprint. Again, that's to provide a bit of flexibility for you guys as startups to say, ultimately, what can you afford and what is going to be most useful to you. So that's kind of the structure that we kind of designed. So we stripped it back from 4 to 5 full-day sessions, basically to 3 half-day sessions. And that's obviously to make it more focused, but also to make it more affordable for startups as well, hopefully without losing the impact and outcome of doing a sprint. So in terms of how we do it, is that hopefully, it's starting to emerge from lockdown and people are starting to come together in person again. We absolutely can do this in person. We have a dedicated collaboration space in Leicester City Centre, but also we can come out to you guys if you've got a space that you prefer to do it in. Again, we can come and do that with you. But we can also do it fully remotely as well. So obviously during the pandemic and during our pilot and through the startups that we've supported so far, is that we've done it purely remotely. And we've still, thankfully kind of been able to demonstrate some real good positive business impact for those startups that we've supported. So I just want to show you basically kind of what the remote kind of collaboration workspace looks like, just to give you an idea as to the flow of those 3 sessions. So if you bear with me 1 second, I'm just going to flick back to the internet. Bear 1 second. Right, I think it's that one. Great. So in terms of why startups fail, so I can share these links with people afterwards. So as long as you guys are happy for us to contact you, we'll kind of send you these links so you can read some of where this understanding and knowledge comes from, and also that visual map. It's all interactive, so you can kind of see who's been a part of that. But on our, like I said, we've got a Miro board. I'm sure that you guys are quite familiar with Miro and Mural and all the other ones by now. But it's basically, like I say, it's there to structure the conversation that we have during those sessions. So the first session itself, like I say, is very much rooted in understanding the problem, in mapping it out in terms of from your customer's point of view or your client's perspective, reframing that problem, and then generating some ideas and some concepts as a result. So, like I say, it's very much the onus is on you as the entrepreneur, as the startup, to really kind of focus in on what those problems are, so we make it as practical as possible. And we get involved. We don't just sit there and we're not just passive in that process. We help you to kind of develop those concepts, to critique, to test some of those assumptions that you might have. So we're that critical friend, but we also help you to kind of, so we do play a little bit of a co-creation, a bit of a co-production role in those ideas as well. We're there to kind of help you and bring our knowledge and experience to the table. So one of the things which we found with solopreneurs in particular is having that team in place, and us being part of that team has been really valuable, because it kind of reduces that idea isolation, I suppose, or that development isolation. We're kind of part of that team with you. So that's kind of like the first session. And like I say, we do a bit of voting, and we kind of zone in on a particular idea that we like and want to kind of take forward. In the second session, we start kind of thinking about critiquing that idea, and is there other elements of other concepts that we want to bring in to enhance it. So we kind of zone in a little bit more in terms of, and start really kind of practically developing this idea and moving it towards a prototype that we can test in the real world. So we go through that journey, and again, we bring our design expertise to the table to help those entrepreneurs and business owners to really kind of come up with a good plan forward, and something which they can test practically. I think that from our experience, what most people struggle with tends to be the second session in terms of getting their head around what could be, but has also been the biggest impact on their journey is actually going, actually, no, this is what it looks like. This is how I can do it going forward. Because quite often as people talk about developing their idea and then start basically going into build and launch, but actually we're skipping that bit. We're doing something quite quick, quite rapid, and a quick and dirty process, for want of a better phrase. So teaching people that can be done and is a really important step towards that full build. That's been a really high point, I think, from a facilitation point of view, is teaching people how to do that, and then realizing that actually, I can do it, despite maybe some challenges initially of visualizing what it might be. So those are the two sessions. Like I said, the third session is optional, and we discuss in advance as to what that test might look like and who's going to do it. And then we'll kind of provide video feedback for anybody that participates in the sprint, so that is a record then of that feedback, and you can then utilize that insight to carry on building and testing. We do have just a very short exercise for us. And rather than invite you all to Miro and get you guys to kind of interact directly with the platform, we can save that for another time. Is that I've already come up with a business challenge, and this actually came from the last startup sprint that we did. So we're working with a retailer who just kind of started out primarily, just started trading in the last 6 months online. And as part of that customer journey is that they had a short kind of feedback questionnaire, is would you come back to us if you enjoyed using our product, so on and so forth, and getting incredibly positive feedback. What they were finding was that people weren't coming back to them as they expected. So in their business model, that repeat custom was quite an important part of their forecast. And people were talking positively about the products and the experience that they had with them as a retailer, but weren't coming back. So they weren't spending their money again with them. So this was the challenge. This was the problem that we kind of identified as a way of proceeding with the sprint. So what I would like you guys to do is take that challenge of getting repeat custom from existing or previous clients or customers, and then reframe that into a how might we query. So I've given 2 examples there. So don't copy those ones. I've already got those ones cornered. But so I've got how might we re-engage with previous clients. So I just basically kind of reworded, I suppose, the actual challenge and just put a how might we in front of it. There was another way of wording it. I put down how might we provide better after sales care. So maybe that was as a strategy of getting people to come back and to spend again, was actually a more detailed kind of after sales process and involvement and engagement with people. But what I'd like you to do is just one each is in the chat, is just kind of put down a how might we, and then try to finish off that query that is rooted in that particular challenge that I've got on that orange sticky there. So the challenge is getting repeat custom from existing previous clients. And then how can you reframe that into a how might we question? So you only need to do one each and just type it into the chat, and I can just pick it up from there. Obviously, if you've got any questions about what I've just asked you to do, then do feel free to ask those as well, if I've not made it clear. I assume you're all very busy typing away. Great, thank you, Emma. Just going to. Interesting that you've gone for the collaboration route. Like it.
I'm lucky because I do already collaborate with someone. And when you got to fix the planet, it's the best way.
Most definitely. And yeah, actually, there's a lot of conversations that we're having around kind of the green sector and sustainability sector, and especially in the startup communities, and how kind of better kind of work closer together to create that impact. So
I'm finding it quite interesting because I'm part of a new female group because of and I like what you said about money, because actually money was the first thing I'd said about why people fail, and I have actually been awarded some money. So I thought, well done, you actually completely proved that point. But I'm finding it really interesting because I'm trying to collaborate with these 40 women who also won the award, and I feel like I'm giving like loads more than quite a lot of them are. But I think part of it is when you work in sustainability, people tend to just do more for one another. I think we're very lucky in that sense, and because those women are spread across different sectors, they're not collaborating. I don't think collaboration is necessarily the first way that people approach things.
I very much agree, and I think there's a lot to be said in terms of how can I frame this. So Sam, Manish, put your fingers in your ears. Is often that a lot of startup programs and accelerators and incubator type spaces is that they encourage that competitive model. You know, get your elbows out, get your kind of slice of the pie, as it were.
And win the money, which is what happens.
Yeah. Whereas in startups, if we're genuinely going to start, seeing a greater kind of percentage being in survival mode, or that do kind of succeed, I think collaboration has got to be part of that solution. So yeah, don't get digress. Is there anybody else with the how might we query? I'll pick up with you, Emma, most definitely, because there's probably a lot of stuff that I can kind of share with you.
I've sent you a LinkedIn request as well, so
fab.
Apologies, it was on my phone, so I didn't have a chance to write a message.
No problems. So we've got a few kind of people that have typed in there. Thanks very much, Sanjay. So the whole purpose of this exercise is to allow us to really think about, I say, moving away from a problem space and moving it into a solution space. So this is kind of a critical part of the path, if you like. In order for us to be able to generate some ideas, is that we're wanting to kind of reframe the problem into a query that we can answer and we can respond to. So I think there's a few there. So how might we gather clients' insight and opinion on upcoming trends and new technology? Yeah, I think that's quite a common one. Is customer insight, especially customer data and collection and analysis, is obviously heavily features in a lot of people's business strategies and business growth strategies in particular. For startups, that can be quite challenging because of having to build that system, and it's another thing for people to do, and it can be quite an expensive process maybe to engage with a consultant around this. However, there might be data that you're naturally capturing as part of that client or customer journey, and then we can think about actually how might we better utilize that data to kind of make it more effective in terms of re-engagement and new sales. And we talk, from I want to talk about customer journey or a client journey point of view. I always kind of go from discovery right through to advocacy. So advocacy is obviously heavily related to this particular problem that we've identified. So actually, these early customers, for example, and this was something which we discussed with the startup, is actually how can you re-engage with them so they can become your champions? What can you offer them that they ultimately become your salespeople? So is there something which we can do that we can trial out in that arena? So there was lots of different concepts and lots of different ideas that we came up with. But yeah, data definitely needs to form part of that, I would suggest. The reason why I put the how might we provide better after sales care, the reason why I put that in there was that was actually the one that we went with. That was the one that it felt like it was specific enough that it focused on about how do we continue our engagement post-sale. So what does that part of the journey actually look like? Because when we did the mapping exercise, there was a big gap there, basically. So that kind of helped us to zone in on what it is that we felt was going to be applicable. It was specific enough, but it was also broad enough that allowed us to understand, well, ultimately, what is after sales care? What does that look like? And then allowed us to go off and do a little bit of research around what other people do in terms of after sales care, you know, in both a startup sense and also in a more kind of established legacy corporate sense as well. So trying to kind of get a feel for what that looks like. We felt that the how might we re-engage with previous clients was potentially was going to be too broad. You know, it's going to be a little bit too kind of yeah, a little bit too vague. That this was something which we always discuss and try to kind of zone in on what gives us a framework and gives us a little bit of direction and what our ideas are about, but don't kind of close it down. So I'll give example. Another idea that we came up with was actually how might we create or how might we convert our customers to a community? So that was another kind of how might we query that we created. But we felt that again, that started to feel a bit too specific, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to create a community. That's going to be our answer. So yeah, with the how might we kind of review, so we want to try and find something which gives us some direction, but also gives us a little bit of leeway in terms of ideas. So I'm going to pull that one down and say that that's the how might we query that we chose. So very quickly, and again in the chat, just one or two responses to that. So in terms of how might we provide better after sales care, just write down one or two ideas that come to mind in terms about after sales care and how might we do a good job of that. Again, it can be from your own experience. It could be even from your own business model, or just you know, an assumption that you think would be a good after sales process. Ask the customer. No, you don't want to do that, Sam. That sounds terrible idea.
Really? Customer development?
Sorry, my sarcasm didn't come through there. No, most definitely. I mean, that's a fundamental part of a sprint. You know, it is that actually it's important that session 3 happens in some way of testing the idea and asking the customer. But involving them in the sprint is a real good way of doing things. So follow-up phone calls. Great. Anybody else with some quick ideas? Amazon. Oof, it's a dirty word. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, especially from a retail point of view, there's a lot of very good examples of how those retailers continue to engage and do some targeted marketing as well. Create the community. There you go. Awesome. So it absolutely could be that you decide that creating that community is important, because maybe from your research is that you've identified that that's what people ultimately like, that's what they want. You know, is through Facebook having you know, kind of that interaction and that exclusivity almost. And exclusivity of what's the word I'm looking for? Of promotions, of discounts, and feeling like you're part of a club, you know, is that was something which we spoke about again. So there's lots of really good examples, especially from a retail point of view, of how people kind of use what you've already bought and then make those suggestions. You know, if you liked this, then maybe you'd like that. You know, and then that's where some of that tech and that insight and data becomes very useful once you've kind of obviously built up a client base. Yeah, but I think sometimes just a personal touch from a startup point of view, you know, you mentioned there about kind of the follow-up phone calls, is that just engaging and just saying, hi, how are you? You know, and just trying to get some qualitative feedback as well will be incredibly useful. So it could be that the prototype that ends up being created, or the concept that is developed, is maybe kind of a little video diary of how people have used your products, you know, and then say, by submitting this little video diary about what it's been like, you submit it to us as a company, we get that qualitative data, but you get a free Christmas package, you know, a little bundle or a basket. So you can incentivize people to do that, and that feeds into that build and learn process for you. So there's lots of different things that you can kind of move on with. So there's lots of kind of different ideas that we kind of rapidly produce, and that moves into that concept phase. And then, like I say, we start kind of critiquing those ideas to move towards a prototype. So I'm just going to come out of the Miro and then go back towards the if I can find it. Give me a second. I've got far too many tabs open that then ends up. I think it's that one. Right, I'm back in it. Excellent. So current slide. So that's how we do it primarily. And like I said, I just want to reiterate that it's fully practical, and it's not theoretical. It's not a case of, you know, doing as we just done there about kind of picking up a kind of theoretical business problem. Is that we zone in on the real problems and challenges that you have as a startup, and we make it practical, and we move towards making it as customer and user-centric as possible. So the benefits, I've listed a few things there in terms of develop test ideas quickly, helps to de-risk your activity. That's true. I think that is one of the big things about sprints full stop, is that you learn quickly, you learn meaningfully, and you do it in a way that hasn't cost you an awful lot of money or time. Yes, it might cost you some money and time, but certainly the alternative is far riskier, it's far more expensive, and it's far more kind of time intensive. So always kind of measure whatever it is that you do in a sprint versus if you didn't do a sprint, what would happen. There's opportunity costs attached to those things as well. Access to expertise and critical friend. This is something which I hadn't really kind of thought about as a benefit until people started kind of feeding this back as being really kind of crucial to them as a startup entrepreneur, is that it can feel a lonely place, even if you're part of co-working spaces or whatever, is that you can still feel like, you know, it's all about you and what you have to do. So actually having somebody to kind of help you through that process in a you know, neutral and objective kind of fashion, is that they really helps them. Focusing priorities. This is something which came as a result of a conversation that we had with all of the guys that we did a pilot with, and we always get kind of that feedback from our startup entrepreneurs that have gone through a sprint. and it featured quite a lot in the conversation that we had with Elle Upshaw, and some of you guys may already know Elle. She has a business called Clock Off, and the business is it came about from her passion of converting vans into camper vans. So her love for the great outdoors and kind of going off on the open road, etc. And she was finding that the problem that she had was the supply of vans started to kind of slow down. It was becoming very expensive. So she wanted to move away from doing, buy, do up and sell as a model, move more towards having her own small fleet that she could then hire out. So she was kind of pivoting towards a slightly different business model. So the sprint kind of helped us really think about what the challenges were in doing that and testing some of those assumptions that she had. I'll just show you kind of some of the, some very short clips of the conversation that I had with Elle when we were reviewing, what the value of the startup sprint actually was. So hopefully this video will play. And she does talk at one point about, I hope this doesn't get shared. But I think it's important to share what she said with you, because I think that what she did share was actually something really quite important and incredibly relevant. So hopefully this will work for you. If you have any problems with the audio, then do let me know. I can share the video after the event instead.
For me, as someone that is juggling every role under the sun, I have like massive decision paralysis because there's so many decisions to be made. I sort of freeze up. And I think what that did for me is just sort of lift one decision off of me. It was like, okay, actually, like, it's like process of elimination sort of thing. Like, even if you get nothing else from it, you get process of elimination with one thing. Like, it's like, they definitely didn't want that. Or that, that's definitely not a priority, but maybe I should say. Like that at the bare minimum was what you get. But I just feel there's so much more to it. And I'm not seeing it as a failure either. I'm seeing it as like the clarity I've had since it has been really eye-opening. And it might have just been coincidence and this was always going to happen. I was always going to go, no, I need to change the way I'm thinking. But I just don't think it was. I think it kind of triggered something in me to just crack on and like just move and keep getting that feedback, all the different things you get, use the feedback that we got from that session itself as well. But just it's kind of a humbling experience to just sort of think you know it all. What was the other part of the question?
So would you recommend it to other startups and why?
Yes, I definitely would. And the why is quite open. I think there's lots of whys. For anyone that's, a solo entrepreneur, I would say to just feel like you've got a team around you for a little moment and be able to bounce ideas and progress ideas without sort of having that sort of tunnel vision. I think it's funny because I know like the language you use and the language Sprint use is all about focusing on customer, and I've never ever seen myself as someone that like I focus on the customer in order to be able to focus on money. Like that's just the way I'm driven. Which hopefully this doesn't get aired. But it's not. I think I've focused on the customer in a very data-driven way, but not in like an actual, like there's more detailed, in-depth conversations. It's just not, I will pick up and take note of the things I want to hear and not the important things. And that, I don't know what part of it has changed that for me, but that has changed for me in seeing that. I think it's almost like no embarrassment, but just a reality check of spent all this time coming up with an idea that you thought was based on your customer need, and actually the feedback to then get is it's not as important what you think it is, and it grounds you a little bit. So I think that there's that element in terms of what it does for the way you look at your decisions. And then I think just the whole thing itself in terms of what outcomes I've had, but I now know what direction I'm taking. Like, that's just a massive one. Like I now just know with a high percentage certainty what direction I'm going to take, and will likely be more effective in getting people to be my first sort of bookings, which is just obvious. Like, that's just an obvious absolute benefit. But I just think there's loads of little ones that about your sort of mindset and approach to your own business.
So what Elle was talking about there is in terms of she wasn't seeing it as a failure, is we came up with an idea. We built a prototype to test it. And when we were testing it with customers or potential customers, is they went, yeah, it's nice, and yeah, it's a value add thing, but there's all of this other stuff that is far more important to me, for me to actually be your customer. And what she was saying there was that insight and that feedback she very probably would have been closed off to. So because it was done, like I say, independently and in a neutral sense, is that helped to kind of shape the direction that she needed to go in, and helped with her priorities, and stopped that decision paralysis. And even though she did say she hopes it doesn't get aired, I thought it was really important to demonstrate that quite often startups and lots of businesses, I don't think this is unique to startups at all, is that they talk about customers in terms of revenue and spend, not actually what the customers want, what they need, and how they behave. So actually the sprint helped her to move her thinking, and how she checks and how she gets that feedback. So there were lots of other things as a result of doing the sprint that has helped her to become more focused and to be able to build and develop her idea in a business in a far more meaningful way. And I'd never ever say that a sprint of any sort is a silver bullet. It absolutely isn't, but it is a tried and tested method and tool and approach that does help people to get to where they need to be more quickly. And if money is a factor, and being able to generate revenue and generate that money and then doing it more quickly is imperative, then a sprint can really help you, and it's a good investment. So there's Elle. I just wanted to just highlight in terms of when we got this feedback, is that Elle is a good example of that. When we look back to the issues that startups have, customer development issues, lack of focus, and understanding that market need, and getting that feedback, from directly from the potential customers. That was an important outcome of the sprint itself, was being able to really help people to provide them with that focus, to engage directly with their customers, to think about what that journey looks like for them and how to develop that customer base. So the sprint we felt that the sprint would be able to help startups to kind of move forward to where they needed to be. So that's Solver Studio. That's the startup sprint. That's what we've created to support startups wherever you are, of whatever size and sector you are. We want to help you. We want to help as much as we can to help you succeed, because we think it's important for the future. We do have some other workshops. Again, I'm happy to share these with people at a later date, and I'll send these slides across as well. But just to let you know of a couple of things that you can do and can get involved with. Just at the bottom there, I have a Calendly set up where basically for 30 to 40 minutes, I have got free kind of slots that are open for entrepreneurs, including from startups, to basically just book in, and we just have a chat. So if you've got a particular idea or a particular challenge, we just talk it through. There's no sales, there's no kind of pitching from me whatsoever. It literally is just for me to be a sounding board and to help people. That's what it's there for. It's totally free. And you guys are more than welcome to book yourselves in and just talk things through. Sometimes it's good to talk, as they say. But just wanted to let you know about another event that we've got booked in as part of Leicester Innovation Week. It's called the High Street Reframed, a service jam. We're doing this on the 25th and 26th of June. That's a Friday and Saturday. So it's a 2-day event. And we're doing a jam. We're going through what we imagine, or hopefully what we can reimagine the post-COVID high street to be about, what it looks like, where the focus needs to be. It's not just about Leicester High Street, it's about the high street in general. You know, how do we make sure that it can survive and be a centre for not just commerce, but for a place to be, to convene, and something which works for the whole city. So like I said, that's part of Innovation Week, and that's in partnership with the Business Gateway. We've also really pleased to invite Sustrans, who are they've written sustainable transport, but they are very much about placemaking, about engaging with people and how to reimagine what could be around physical infrastructure, and obviously they're very much interested in the high streets of the future as well. So we're working in partnership with them on this particular event, as well as the Business Improvement District and High Cross. So we'd love to see you there. Registrations are available now with the first event as part of Innovation Week. So you can sign up for free and come and join us and be part of the conversation. And that's it. I think I've rambled right through to the end. So I'll hand you back to Sam. And I hope you found it interesting, useful, and I haven't bored you to death. So thank you very much, guys.